iOS 16 is one of the most substantial updates Apple has given iOS in recent years that makes the iPhone feel fresh once again, thanks to iOS 16's biggest feature, the lock screen. After 6 months, the lock screen improvements that Apple has made with this OS upgrade, that's what's impressed me the most about it. And one of my favorite things about the new lock screen is actually the media player that pops onto it. I love that it pops up not only when you listen to something on your iPhone, but also when you listen to anything via AirPlay on a group of speakers. Another thing I love about it is you can tap the album artwork on the mini player to make it much larger, which also changes that blurred background color based on the colors in the album artwork. But of course, the thing that really keeps the lock screen feeling fresh is wallpapers, and having multiple of them. You can easily switch between and create new lock screens by long pressing the lock screen view in iOS 16. You have quite a few options to choose from, and these wallpapers can be set for both your lock screen and your home screen. Apple will even do some cool animations for some, like the Earth one when you swipe up. One of the most unique looks you can get for your lock screen is when you use the Suggested Photos wallpaper. iOS 16 lock screens will place the time either slightly in front of or behind the subject of the photo you used for the lock screen image, which adds this nice little subtle depth effect. You can swipe through to get different looks like classic Instagram filters, and you can tap on the time or date to change the typeface. iOS 16 lock screens also have widgets. You can choose from ones made by Apple or ones from apps you've already downloaded to your iPhone. For the past 6 months, I've used widgets in 2 ways: to show me information or to act as a shortcut to get me into a specific app. For example, on my favorite lock screen with the dynamic weather background, I have the weather widget, which shows me the current temperature and conditions, and this is a widget that presents information to me, but I can also use it as a shortcut to get directly into the weather app to get more information. Another widget I use all the time as a shortcut is the Pocket Casts widget. It takes me right into the Pocket Casts app, and importantly, in a faster way than I could before. These lock screen widgets can help you remove an extra step to just get right into your most used apps. And during the past 6 months, I've noticed a few widgets from apps that have been added, like the Tesla app, which shows you your car's battery charge, or sleep data from the Health app, which shows me how long I slept the previous night. Another cool thing with lock screens is you can tie them to different focus modes. Focus modes were first introduced in last year's iOS 15 and expand upon the iPhone's Do Not Disturb mode, allowing you to schedule different focus modes throughout the day, filtering notifications from certain apps and contacts. With iOS 16, I can now link lock screens to focus modes like Do Not Disturb, which I use a lot while working to block out all notifications. You can also select specific home screens and Apple Watch faces to be tied to these focus modes as well. Another big change with iOS 16 that I've really been enjoying involves iMessage. Apple finally rolled out the ability to edit messages right after sending them by long pressing them on the iPhone, which, as someone who sends a typo every once in a while, I greatly appreciate. You can also unsend messages right after you send them as well, and also in the main messages view, you can swipe a message to the right in order to mark it as unread if you'd like to respond to it later. Another random feature in iOS 16 that I've actually found myself using quite a bit is called Lift Subject from Background. Here's how it works. You simply bring up a photo basically anywhere in iOS, tap and hold on that photo, and then select Copy Subject. And then you can paste that image wherever you'd like in an iMessage to send to a friend. The Home app is another area of improvement in iOS 16. It now looks and works a lot better and now supports Matter. Overall, I found the response time from when you hit a button to when a device turns on or off to be quite fast. Now, another thing I've really liked about iOS 16 is the Health app. And the Health app in general for iOS, I think, has been a pretty underrated feature. Apple does a great job with the design of the app, gives good information on what certain health data and readings actually mean, so you don't get unnecessary anxiety over a certain reading, and I love the trend notifications like telling me to get off my and climb more stairs, or telling me when I hit my sleep goal for 2 weeks in a row. Lastly, let's talk about weather. iOS 16's weather app is much improved over the previous generations of this app. It now relies on Apple's own weather data and models, which come from their dark sky acquisition, and you now have more detailed maps that are for the most part well designed. However, sometimes the rendering of the precipitation chart will just cause precipitation to just kind of disappear, which is annoying. iOS 16 also improved dictation. Apple Maps also got some needed updates, and overall I'd say it's pretty useful. Its turn-by-turn navigations I've actually found to be quite a bit better than Google Maps, specifically on when it tells you you need to turn. I feel like Apple just gives me more of a heads up than Google does, at least in my experience here in North Carolina. Apple also substantially overhauled Family Share, so parents can now manage requests for screen time right from iMessage, and with Family Checklist, Apple will show you suggestions of other ways to use the Family Share and parental control features. Lastly, with iOS 16, Apple rolled out Passkey, which is a technology that basically replaces the need for a password. But for the past 6 months, I haven't run into a situation where I've had the opportunity to use it. Alright, now let's talk about a few things in iOS 16 that I still think needs some work. And the first is lock screen widgets. And I know, yeah, I just said I really liked lock screen widgets a few minutes ago, and I do. The problem here is I want more of them. For example, there's no Apple Music widget where YouTube Music already has one. Another thing I think Apple could improve is AirPlay speaker group volume controls. I find they're too easy to make the wrong adjustment or accidentally break up the speaker group by a mistap. Apple in general could also do a better job in iOS with preventing spam texts, like scanning an incoming text message on device for sketchy links. And then there's Siri. Siri's progression to being an even smarter voice assistant seems to have stalled somewhat with iOS 16. It's still nowhere near as good as Amazon or Google's assistant in terms of general search queries. Now, the last big issue I think Apple needs to address with iOS 16, and this is a fundamental core big thing about iOS, it's they need to support sideloading apps and third-party app stores. It seems like they're already going to be forced to do this with iOS 17, at least in Europe. But what I'd like to see Apple do is just roll this feature out worldwide. It would make the iPhone software experience more consistent with the Mac for pro users, and you'd see more innovative software and apps developed for the iPhone that have a better user experience than what we have today. For example, you'd be able to purchase Kindle books off the Amazon app. And if Apple markets the Mac in a way that implies it's safe to download apps on the Mac from the web, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case for iOS. Now, to see my review of the device that can take full advantage of iOS 16, check out my 6 months later review of the iPhone 14 Pro. You can get to that video by clicking on the thumbnail here. And for an explainer video on how Matter changes the smart home and how it works with Apple's Home app that I mentioned earlier, you can get to that explainer by clicking on the video thumbnail here. And let me know in the comments what your favorite feature of iOS 16 has been and what you think Apple should improve for iOS 17. And subscribe to the channel to see more videos on Apple products like this one. For 6 months later, I'm Josh Tedder. Thanks for watching.